Hello everyone, I welcome you all to another video by Legacy IAS where we are going to talk about the Supreme Court's reaction on a very important social issue of India, actually of something that is making global headlines about the population. And here we're going to talk about the policy with regards to population control in India. The argument whether India should have a two-child policy or not. The Supreme Court made very cryptic comments, very harsh and very strong statements with regards to the kind of judgment that has come out, but it has to be seen in the right perspective, and he has made some very practical comments with regards to the judgment. We'll try to understand what the petitioner is also saying, what are the arguments, and in totality, where does this entire issue stand. So let us first understand few aspects which are here in this regard. Firstly, if we look at population, very recently it has been observed that the global population has reached up the 8 billion mark, and India in this entire scenario is going to actually hopefully surpass China, being the world's largest populated country in 2023 according to the UN report, according to the World Population Prospects 2022 report. India is actually a signatory to the program of action to the International Conference on Population and Development of 1994, which is basically providing strict coercion in the matters of family planning. So, against basically strictly preventing the state against coercing the societies and the families to decide on the issue of family planning. Now, if we look at how India has been performing in terms of the policy on population, firstly, we actually started the entire concept of family planning on a national level in 1952. Eventually, we saw that the birth rate kind of began to drop, but very, very gradually, and we still had large family sizes in the country. So then the government implemented forced sterilization, particularly against the urban poor and the Muslim population. This was around the time of emergency between 1975 to 1977. Parallelly, we also had China coming up with such stringent policies, and eventually it was found out that the government found that once the fertility rates had dropped, all right, they started with the problem of an aging population, which meant that once the country has reached this aging population, even after relaxing the birth control policies and allowing couples to have two children, all right, or three children in that matter, the birth rates continue to remain low, all right, particularly in the urban middle class women, which was basically favored by the government. So here we see what we've seen the history in China, that when China tried to curb down on the number of children you have, when the country reached the aging population, it was very difficult to bring them back to in spite of very favorable birth control policies. So both India and China eventually had kind of very skewed sex ratios, especially because of selective sex abortion, and also which led to lot of social problems, including forced marriages as well as human trafficking. China found that in spite of trying to reverse this, it was unable to do with the demographic transition that was basically happening, and lot of couples, basically they were facing a lot of financial pressure, including the cost of raising children and caring for the elderly, because of which they made such choices. In fact, similar to China, some of the Indian states where women have high level of education, they don't really have aspirations to have children, and that is leading to low birth rates. Now, in April 1996, there was a target-based approach. This entire target-based approach was kind of abandoned and substituted with a much more decentralized, which a much more broad out approach with regards to focusing on community needs rather than, and health actually, rather than the demography in particular. So our approach kind of changed. We led to the establishment or introduction of the National Rural Health Mission, focusing on community needs and health rather than demography in 2005, whereby we linked the voluntary family program with the health of adolescent, maternal as well as child health. So we're trying to indirectly kind of approach it through the National Rural Health Mission. As of today, a lot of states individually, including Assam, Gujarat, Maharashtra, Odisha, Rajasthan, Uttarakhand, Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, they already have some sort of two-child norm policies, right? With regards to, let's say, whether it be political elections or for that matter entering the government service, in some way or the other, they have kind of incentivized or tried to have some kind of a two-child norm in their respective states. Now, recently, according to the fifth round of the National Family Health Service survey, that is NFHS 5, today, if we look at the fertility rate, basically the one which measures the average number of children born to a woman in a lifetime, has reduced. Now, in this background, if we look at the entire discussion which has happened and what the Supreme Court is having to say, that is going to be very, very interesting. Let us first look at how this particular judgment came up before the Supreme Court. So here, firstly, we saw that the Delhi High Court was the one when a plea was kind of submitted before the Delhi High Court. The Delhi High Court dismissed that particular plea where you were trying to enforce a two-child norm on the families. We had a Delhi BJP leader, Ashwini Kumar Upadhyay. He was the one who basically filed a petition, and accordingly, the Supreme Court had issued a notice in January 2020, okay, to the central government. That particular point of time, the petitioner basically said that we basically want a law which tries to bring out and enforce a two-child norm. All right, this can further be looked up into by the parliament. Now, there were several arguments which happened when this entire petition went to the House of the Supreme Court. First, we look at the arguments which were put forward by the petitioner. So here Mr. Upadhyay is saying that, look, if you see globally, 20% of the occupation is basically occupying 2% of the country's land. This is also the case in India. And here, when we have such a huge population pressurizing 2% of the country land, there's a huge pressure that we have on resources. They also said that, currently, if you look at how India is, we are actually being deprived of certain rights, and that is only because of population pressure. Right to clean air, drinking water, health, peaceful sleep, shelter, livelihood, education. All right, so basically are the rights which are being guaranteed in the fundamental rights through Article 21, 21A. They've not been, kind of utilized and not being provided to all citizens. And we're continuing to have our population explosion. So what he basically also said, that we had basically marched ahead of China, and 20% basically still don't have Aadhaar cards, and we are now inviting or having so many people from the Rohingya Muslims, and also from the Bangladesh. So now what the court said in this response, he said that now do you think it is a duty of the court to fix the problem of population? All right. So the court was actually kind of little irritated when it said that please try to bring some reasonable issues before the court. All right. It is the duty or the job of the government to look over or look after the family welfare programs. So Supreme Court kind of rejected the pleas which wanted or which seeked the two-child policy. Now, the problem of population explosion, according to the judiciary, is something that the legislature has to kind of look down into. Though it is not the task of the judiciary, the lawmaking procedure, according to separation of powers and all, according to the constitution, is of the parliament to be done. And in fact, the Supreme Court was very positive that the way in which the Indian population is stabilizing. So Supreme Court said that, this kind of a matter can be dealt very differently, and it is not something that the judiciary has to kind of look into. So at that particular point of time, the petitioner also requested that can we have the law commission stepping in so that they can kind of examine whether we can have a feasible law. They can kind of study the matter, look into it. To that, the Supreme Court basically said that population is not something that will stop overnight or in one day for that matter. All right. So there is nothing that the Law Commission can do in this regard. It basically said what report can the Law Commission prepare on population explosion. It's not something that can be done overnight. According to the court, this is basically something where the court is not going to be involved. Now, what is the government, responding or saying or doing in this particular scenario? So, when the center was being asked, so in December 2020, the center had filed an affidavit in response to this plea. They basically said that the respondent, which was basically in this case the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, that particular ministry plays both a supportive as well as a facilitative role in achieving healthcare reforms as well as outcomes. All right, so they play a role to provide healthcare, and they can only act as a facilitator through the different state-led reforms. State happens to be a very important subject and a matter dealing with in the state list. So state-led reforms are something which are important, and the entire welfare, family welfare program in India is basically voluntary. So here families are allowed to adapt the different family planning methods, what is best suited to them. We can we can basically make kind of policies with regards to healthcare, but not make policies with regards to family planning. So at this particular point of time, we also need to understand that there are experts who are also having different opinions in this regard. If you look at the situation in India, all right, mothers are having much fewer children than they used to have. All right, despite having a lower fertility rate, our population is still growing. The idea essentially, that our country should also kind of adopt something like a one child policy is something that has really gained global attention and national attention now. But according to experts, it's really misguided and also dangerous to kind of have such kind of policies in India, because both the countries have faced problems with whenever they have introduced such population policies, and any kind of such population controls have a very serious consequences on both women as well as minority community. In fact, it's actually an irony that because the way in which women's reproductive choices are coming up, still India's birth rate is actually kind of increasing. In fact, if we look at today, the social issue is such that many women are actually getting surgical contraception after having either two children or sometimes even after having one son. So, two child policy in India is basically can have very serious humanitarian as well as ethical consequences. So this often we see that these debates have taken sometimes unfortunately a communal angle. At the end of the day, we need to understand that we cannot undermine the reproductive choice, the reproductive freedom of choice, all right, and try to increase gender inequality in the country. Ultimately, we have to understand that according to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the freedom to have a family and decide the size of family should and can never be violated. So this is something which has to be upheld and looked into, and the government can only take positive steps in this regard to try and improve the life and the health of the people that are in place. So very heated arguments and very strong opinions on both sides as to where you're kind of caught up between the pressure on resources and at the same time the freedom of choice. So it is a debate, I think, which has been going for quite some years now, and it does not look an end in the near future. I think society is only going to change over a period of time and evolve, and we'll see and be a part of this evolution. So I hope you can enjoy this evolution through Legacy IAS. So subscribe for more such videos by Legacy IAS. Let me know if you have understood and enjoyed the discussion by liking that button, and also share it with those who still need information on this. Thank you so much.